Why do you need to learn vocabulary in a context like a story? Why am I making so many story videos lately? And more importantly, how can you learn the most that you can from these videos? Welcome to English Coach 3Ts. I'm Tanya, and today I'd like to start by thinking about if you were to ask almost any language teacher, what's the best way to learn vocabulary? I bet that a huge number of them would say, in context. And what do they mean in context? What do they mean is in a story or in an example using that word. So the word isn't just floating out there by itself, it's actually connected to a sentence or even better, a story, and even better, something you can relate to, something that's meaningful to you. And if you asked these same language teachers, what's more important to learn first, grammar or vocabulary? A lot of them are going to say vocabulary, or at least they'll say you need to learn both, because grammar by itself isn't going to get you very far. And what I mean is, if all you know is grammar, it's really difficult to communicate what you need with someone who speaks the language. But if you know vocabulary, you can communicate a lot, even if you don't know exactly how the sentence should be formed. So let me give you an example. If you need something like this, and you know that it's called a coffee cup or a coffee mug, or even just a cup, it's easy for you to say, cup, or need cup, or want cup. Of course, if you can say, I need a cup, please, or I need a coffee cup, please, that's very clear. But need cup is going to get you a long ways. People are going to know what you need just by the vocabulary. But if you only have the grammar, I need a, please, and you don't have the vocabulary for what this thing is called, they're not going to know what you need unless you can point at it. If you can't point at it, you're going to have to find a way to describe the thing you need. And this is why vocabulary is really important to learning another language, because it's the meat of what we use to describe or help other people know what we need or what we want or what we're trying to say. The number one reason anyone learns a language is to communicate with other people or to connect with other people. And stories are the way that we do that. So I gave you an example using the cup or the mug, but let's take two vocabulary words you may not have heard before and help you to see how learning them in context works better. So the two words are plethora and cornucopia. Now, both of these words are common in the United States for vocabulary. They aren't as common as their synonyms. So plethora means a lot of something. So a synonym could be a lot, huge, something like that. And these are good words to know. But if you know another word to communicate the same thing, not only does this make what you're saying more interesting to the other person, but it also helps you to level up your English. So I remember learning the word plethora when I was younger. I don't remember exactly where I learned it, but I remember when I heard it and learned that it just means a lot of something. I was like, this is awesome, because I can remember this word because it's so unusual, plethora. And I started walking around talking about this word to myself in my mind. It would have been even better if I had spoken about it out loud, but I would just think of things that I had a plethora of. Like, there's a plethora of air. I have a plethora of books. I drink a plethora of water. Speaking of that, I think I'll have a drink of water. By doing this, I quickly learned the meaning of this word, but what made it so that it became a part of my vocabulary, or we might say that I owned this word, it was a word that I can use, is that I started using it right away. I started saying it every time I wanted to say the word a lot or a huge amount or a big amount, even if it was a little over the top. And what I mean by over the top is this word maybe isn't used as commonly as other words like a lot or a huge amount. So it could be over the top if you were using it all of the time, or there might be very casual situations where it's a little over the top. It's too much to use this word. But I didn't care. I was learning and I was using this word. Now, this is a very common word for me to use, and it works great in everyday situations, but also in professional or more formal situations, especially in writing. Now that I've talked about this word a little bit, you've probably already started the process of learning it because I taught it to you in context. I told you a story. But if you want to get even more, start to think of ways you can use this word in your life in ways that are meaningful for you. Just by doing this, you're already farther down the road to learning this word than if I had just given it to you on a list of words. But sometimes we have a list of words, and I'm going to talk about what to do with that later. So the second word, cornucopia. This word is maybe not as common or useful as the word plethora, although it depends on your personality because, of course, you get to choose the words that you want to use. But a cornucopia literally is one of those funny shaped baskets that you might see when you see things about Thanksgiving in the United States. In fact, I mentioned it in a live video just recently, and I will link that video below for you. But even a lot of native speakers will forget what to call this basket because the word cornucopia is kind of unusual. I love unusual words because they have a different sound and they help us to make our speaking or our writing even more interesting. But in order to remember this word, you could do kind of the same thing we did with the word plethora. I told you already, it literally means that funny looking basket thing that we use at Thanksgiving. So you might not have a lot of times when you need to use that word, but we also use it to mean a lot, similarly to plethora. We usually use it to mean a lot of things specifically. For instance, I might say I have a plethora of ideas, where I might say I have a cornucopia of books or things. Now, it doesn't mean you can't say I have a cornucopia of ideas. You can. In fact, people will use this word creatively and in different ways, again, just to make what they're saying more interesting. So I picked these two words for a couple of reasons. Not only are they words that sound interesting, they're words that I really like, they're words that I have stories about, and they both have similar meanings, and you can use them in many, many situations. You might say a cornucopia of situations. So in this way, just in what you've listened to so far, I know that you have a better chance of remembering these words than, again, if I had just put them on the screen with a definition and you just went on to learn another word or to do whatever else you were going to do, which brings me to another tip. You're more likely to learn words if you don't overwhelm yourself with too many words. What I mean is, if you're trying to learn huge lists of words out of context, that's going to be frustrating. And things that are frustrating don't usually contribute to a positive outcome. So we want to have a positive outcome. And for that reason, we want to make our learning process doable and enjoyable. So these two words, by the end of this video, you're going to be set up or ready to start using these words in your everyday conversation. I'm also going to give you some tips how you can continue to remember them here in just a little bit. So at the beginning of the video, I asked you, how can you get the most out of our story videos? Or actually this video, or really any video you're listening to learn English. A big part of getting the most out of it is to pick out the parts that you want to learn. And I recommend picking out 2 or 3, at the most 4 or 5 things that you want to learn. And then write those things down so that you have a place where you can see them. Another thing that happens is if what you're learning is in context and then you have a visual or a picture of it, you're more likely to remember it. More on that in another video. So in the videos, the story videos that I've been making, just watching it is going to help you to remember the things I say because I use them in context, I explain them, and then I give a lesson at the end with ideas for how you can remember it. But here are some things you can do with those videos and any video. I know you've heard this before, but you have to repeat what you have learned. In fact, if you remember this one thing, I know that it is going to help you to learn more English, which is instead of working so hard to learn more new things, focus on the things you have learned and using those things you have learned. Of course, you need to learn more new things, but you're probably currently trying to learn a lot of new things and practicing them or repeating them a smaller amount of time. So just switch that. Start practicing and using what you already know more and continue adding new things, but add them in a quantity or in an amount that you can handle, an amount that is going to work for you. So let's take one of the videos that I have told a story about before. My most recent video was about Thanksgiving and being grateful. I had one about my daughter being lost in a major store here in the United States. I'll link these videos and also put them at the end of this video so you can use them when you're done learning these tips here. So you're going to want to watch this video through and maybe take some quick notes, but focus on the video and understanding as much as you can. Remember, don't worry about being perfect. Let go of perfection. That is also a huge thing that will help you. Then at the end of both of those videos, I give you a lesson. Be sure to follow the lesson, pause the video, write down the things I tell you to do, and do the things that I tell you to do in the lesson because I have thought of those things specifically to help you remember the vocabulary and be able to use it in conversation. Then take it a step further. Re-watch the story, repeat it. Watch that story again right there and then. Normally we say right then and there, so that you can now remember even more, or pardon me, not remember, but understand even more of what you've watched. Because now you've learned those words and you can hear them in context, in the story, and you'll remember. You can do this when you're reading as well. I spend every day in the morning, I have something I read where I have the words or I look up the words I need. I read it, get the basic idea, and then I reread it so that I can understand it now. And this time when I reread it, I'm like, yes, I understand this. Next thing you need to do is repeat that. It's not really about how much you repeat it or how many times you repeat it, which is a question I get a lot, but the quality of how you are repeating it. So repeating it in context, now that you understanding it, so context is important, understanding it is important, and then repeating it at times that are not always the same. We call this spaced repetition, and I bet you've heard me say it before because this is something I mention a lot. Spaced repetition is different than the type of repetition we had where if you wanted to learn the word plethora, for instance, you said to yourself, plethora, 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 plethora. There's no spaces. It's even more effective if you can do that. If that is working for you, then keep doing it for sure. But If you're having trouble remembering vocabulary, space your repetition and don't use the exact same spaces. Make those spaces, some of them little, some of them big, some of them little, some of them medium, some of them big, so that your brain gets a more natural approach to this repetition, just like when you were learning your native language. So what if you do have a list of vocabulary that you need to learn? This is kind of an antiquated way of learning vocabulary. Antiquated meaning an old way of learning vocabulary. See what I did there? I gave you another word in context. So write it down, antiquated, because you can use it with some of the tips I'm giving you here. So let's say you have a list and maybe there's 10 or 20 words on them. A couple things I would do. I would break this list down. What I mean by break it down is make it into maybe 2 or 3 smaller lists, depending on how much time you have to learn these words. Make the list more manageable, more doable, something that is a little easier for you to work with. Then take the words on your smaller list and find out what the words mean and make examples in context that is meaningful to you. If it's something that's meaningful to me, it's not going to be helpful to you unless you can relate to it. This is another reason that I tell stories that are relatable to a lot of people. You have to have an idea of how this felt in your life. So make examples that do that for you. Then you might want to look at possibly putting these words into a story if you can. Sometimes not all the words will go into the same story, but if you can use some of these words together, you'll start to link them and give them reasons for your brain to link them together. Look at images of these words. Go online and search for images of the words, even if they're verbs, so action words that don't have an exact image. Maybe put the sentence in and look for images, and this will help you to remember that as well. Another tool I love to use for English learning is the website Youglish. Youglish does not support this channel at this time. They aren't paying me to say this, but it's one of my favorite websites. I'll put a link to them below and you can see where to find them here. The reason I like them is you can learn to pronounce the word correctly, and you can also find them in context. You can find lots and lots of videos that use this word or phrase, and then take that video, the one that you like or the 2 or 3 that you like, and make it relate to you. I know that if you start using the tips that I gave you here today, you're going to get more out of the videos I'm making for you, but quite frankly, even out of videos that other teachers are making, or television shows, or movies, or in whatever way you find videos to learn English. This also, by the way, works for words that you're finding in things that you read, in books, in stories, in magazines, in things like that. If this video was helpful for you, be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe so that you don't miss any more English lessons here on English Coach 3Ts. If you're ready to watch one of our story videos that I mentioned today, here's one of them. And if you've seen that one already, give this one a try. I'll see you in class.